Sometimes people ask me, how do you get on stage and tell a story or do improv? Because just the thought of it is terrifying to me. The reason is because if I didn't do things that scared me, I wouldn't do anything. And I hate limitations. I have an anxiety disorder and a strong urge for external validation. So lots of times I will just say, fuck off anxiety, because I need to feel liked today. I attribute this odd combination of hiding out in corners at parties and getting on stage and entertaining people to being the baby of 4 children in the family. When I was a kid, I would do things fearlessly that I wouldn't think of doing today, like riding a skateboard. It was so much fun to go down my bumpy driveway to my back door. But today, if I got on a skateboard, I am 100% sure I'd end up in a cast and unable to attend to personal hygiene for weeks, if not months. And singing. I loved to sing in front of people when I was a kid. I joined the choir in church, front row, sang anything they gave us to sing. And being the baby, my sole purpose in the family was to be cute. So I would drag a chair into the middle of the living room, clutching a hairbrush, and belt out the soundtrack to Grease the movie to anybody who would watch or listen. My sister, my oldest sister, is a little over 10 years older than I am. And she's been like a mother to me most of my life. She's had my back long before I understood what that term meant. For example, when I was in kindergarten, the teacher didn't let me go to the bathroom when I needed to, so I wet my pants. My angry 17-year-old sister marched into my doctor's office and said, Gloria needs a note that says she has a bladder problem and she can go to the bathroom whenever she wants. Small town doctor, problem solved. That's the kind of sister she is. So when I was 12 and she was 23 and getting married and asked me to be in her wedding, I was thrilled. She got married at this little pond on the outskirts of the small North Carolina town we grew up in August. It was hot but beautiful. And we were to process just like we would if we were in a church, one by one, spaced out. It was a long walk because the service was halfway around the pond. It gave me a lot of time to observe all the beautiful, lush greenery, the blooming flowers, and how my anxiety was ratcheting up several hundred notches the closest I got to the service. Because my sister asked me to sing a solo at her wedding, accompanied by a harp. I could be wrong, but I don't think a harp is an easy instrument to sing to. It didn't help that I only rehearsed twice because the harpist lived out of town and my mom would only drive me that many times. I dreaded carrying the weight of being the only singer at my sister's wedding because I was not that kind of brave back then. I wasn't really any kind of brave. I stood in front of our family and friends and squeaked out the song I was meant to sing loudly as my sister looked on, smiling, encouraging me. But I knew she had to be disappointed. And then I felt embarrassed. And I realized the audience was probably embarrassed for me, so that secondhand embarrassment felt like third-hand embarrassment. It was a lot of embarrassment for me to feel, so much so that I kept glancing over my sister's shoulder as I was singing at the path that I walked in on, thinking, could I run faster than anyone here and get away? Definitely, because I was the youngest there, but I determined that running after singing badly was slightly worse than just singing badly. After the song was over, I sat on the bench clutching the flowers that I had a vice grip on while I was singing. And I sat soaked in sweat and shame, just waiting for the service to be over. Afterward, we had the reception, and several people came up to me to comment on my singing. A couple were generous, and they would say, good job, which it absolutely wasn't. Others would say, I couldn't really hear you because I guess I wasn't close enough. And then there was the lighthearted, great job, Gloria. It all sucked. But the one that stung the most was what my sister, the bride, said. And it's not that she said anything all that horrible, because I would have agreed wholeheartedly with all of it had I been 23 instead of 12, because no one could hear me, and my mother should have taken me to more than 2 rehearsals. But 12-year-old me was self-conscious about all things Gloria, so I just wanted to hide in a corner, pretend it never happened, and never sing in front of anyone again. That was 1984. The year is now 2014, and I am the producer of a summer improv intensive, also a participant. And it's a week of getting high on improv and making new friends. Yes, and is the primary tenet of improv. I accept your offer, and I'm going to add to it. So after a week of yes-anding the hell out of everything, we just slid into our showcase, pushing fear aside, ready for anything. It was a threefer. The first 2 were our class split in half, and the third was a mystery show that was to be directed by a local improviser, Jason Vines. Jason used to say he wanted to break improv, so he tried all kinds of strange things, and his shows were always fun. So when he said, I need volunteers, I said, yes, and sign me up. The first 2 shows were done. We were happy they were done. They seemed to go well, and we were very excited as those of us who volunteered for Jason's show stood outside the door waiting to get on stage again. I was up front with Jason. Most of my producer responsibilities had kind of cleared out of my head, so I could make room to wonder, what are we going to do? Because the last time I saw one of Jason's shows, the stage was full of mousetraps with blindfolded improvisers doing scenes, just waiting for their toes to get snapped. But then I remembered seeing, when I was performing, a piano stage right that no one had used yet and was not typically there. I said, Jason, are we going to do musical improv? And he just nodded and smiled. And then I remembered how much Jason loves musical improv. In that short amount of time, I was able to convey to him how terrified I was to sing in front of people. But it was not enough time for me to slip to the back of the group and get out of performing. Because the next thing I know, I'm standing on stage, terrified. But I've had anxiety for a while, so I can get pretty creative when it comes to coping with life and death situations, and as absurd as it sounds, this felt like life or death. I masterfully dodged every opportunity to sing by myself by joining any chorus or ensemble that was on stage, because it would count as participation without humiliation. It's the end of the show. All the improvisers are on the wings, which is kind of off stage, and I'm behind whoever I can be behind, just kind of vibrating with energy because I'm like, I did it. I sang a little, but not by myself, and I got out of this show. And then Jason says to the audience, well, we have time for one more song. Who hasn't done a solo? I took a step back, wishing there had been a trap door somewhere behind the stage. And the woman in front of me steps aside and says, Gloria hasn't. I wish I knew who that was and said that. Jason called me out and put a chair center stage and asked me to squat on it. Then he announces to the audience very lovingly, Gloria is really scared to sing in front of people, so she needs all your love and support. And everybody's cheering, Gloria, Gloria. It made it impossible to say, I'm not fucking doing this, Jason. He said, here's what you're going to do, Gloria. You're a dog at a dog show, and I want you to sing about why you'd rather be anywhere but here. It's like, that's a stretch. Somewhere between assignment and music starting, I remembered what I had told my kids when they started doing improv, which is, if you're going to suck at something, suck with your whole chest, because then it'll suck a little less. The song was a bit of a blur, but I belted out a tune that apparently made sense and rhymed occasionally, but I just know it was over. And I stepped off stage and into the green room and began to cry. I'm sure it is very obvious to all of you why I was so scared to sing in front of people, but it wasn't until those involuntary tears came flooding out of me that I remembered all the disappointment and embarrassment and shame that I felt when I sang at my sister's wedding. It was uncontrollable. I would love to stand here and tell you that those tears healed me, that I am cured of my fear of singing in front of people. Absolutely not. The only thing I refuse to do with my troupe when I improvise is sing. If they endow that to me, I tell them I will block that shit and not yes and it. And I still hate limitations, especially when it limits people who are around me. But whenever I see someone doing musical improv or karaoke or even singing a really confident verse of Happy Birthday, I can't help but look at them and think, how in the world do you do that? Because it's absolutely terrifying to me. Thank you.